Hey everybody, welcome back to the Tonic Accord podcast. Alex Kapitko, Drew Nepley, we met at Chapman University, and we like to talk politics. We both work in politics now, and probably drove some of our roommates crazy about politics back in the day, I could imagine.
True, yeah.
But you know, Drew, so I think it was last week, Michael Flynn was at what I like to call the QAnon rallies, or the QAnon rallies, and someone in the crowd asked, how do you feel about the Myanmar situation, and should that happen here? For those listening, Myanmar, they actually mean Myanmar, but that does show the intelligence of some of the QAnon type, I guess you could say. But anyways, Michael Flynn said, yeah, I think that should happen here. It'd be good. And since then, a lot of polling and a lot of interviews with Trump-leaning supporters in swing states have shown that a lot of these people want a Myanmar type of situation. So it drove me into then looking into what's actually happening in Myanmar right now. And, you know, you and I covered this back in February when Aung San Suu Kyi, who was the democratically elected leader of Myanmar, she was I think they call her the counselor. She was the first democratically elected leader, Nobel Peace Prize, blah, blah, blah. You know, she got ousted in a free and fair election by the military junta, who technically runs the country. And since then, I mean, I believe she's still kind of missing, or just hasn't been in front of the public eye. But since then, things have gotten like pretty damn bad. Like, the military since February has arrested roughly 4,000 people. There's been like hundreds of deaths.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now there's this guy Danny Fenester, who is an American journalist. He's kind of known as being sort of a voice for the voiceless. He's kind of a human rights journalist who was working for Burmese human rights organization, and he's the fourth foreign journalist detained since the February coup. And I guess the State Department in the U.S. has been trying to reach out and just talk to this junta and try to get this guy out of there, and they won't cooperate. And it's so, like, the parallels to me, just kind of doing kind of a comparative thing here, is that some Trumpist QAnon Republicans want a Myanmar-like situation, and if you look at the parallels, it's kind of disturbing. It was a democratic election that the junta seemed to think was invalid, and they used force to, you know, quell that election. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people that for someone that would say something like, I want what's happening in Myanmar to happen in the United States. Myanmar, right. I don't think they really understand what's happening in Myanmar. First of all, like the idea that they want a military junta to completely take override all of our constitutional institutions is crazy to think of at all. But to really dive into the details, like, first of all, we covered Myanmar, like you said, about a year ago. And we looked into how the formation of their government, and it has to include over a third of it is military seats, right? That's something alone that is completely different than the makeup of the United States government. We don't have anything like that requires military generals to be senators or anything of that sort. Their history of the military junta history in Myanmar is complex and entrenched in that country. Again, nothing like anything we have in the United States, where, you know, our military is avowedly apolitical, and thankfully, because it's not supposed to be a political institution. So again, I think, one, just on an institutional level, they're completely different scenarios. So I don't think people fully understand why, like, the conversation around the military junta is so prominent in Myanmar. This is not something that can just happen in the United States at all. So historically, I don't think people understand anything about military juntas in Myanmar and how that government is made up. And then two, yeah, like, again, it's like, that's so against our own constitution to have a military junta to just redact an election and declare or reinstate someone as victor, is, again, just like in the realm of lunacy. But the fact that someone like Michael Flynn, who used to be in the military, who he should of all people know this to be the most ridiculous notion, is to say that, you know, it's obviously just playing to Trump's base of people that don't have a full understanding of what these terms mean, and just feel the emotional drive of I just want the military to just put Trump in office. Like, they just want Trump to have won. Really, what they really want is to Trump to have won, and to be president, without really thinking of the implications and the precedent something like a military junta takeover would set. They don't think about those consequences or the realities of that. It's more of, I just want Trump to be in office.
Absolutely. And no, I think that's a very good point. Now, of course, yeah, the U.S. system is very different from the Burmese system, and that is obviously, yeah, very clear. My issue is it's just the rhetoric of it is saying that, like, see, in Myanmar they didn't believe that the election was correct, and the military took up arms. Like, obviously, the U.S. military, I don't think, would take up arms against the U.S. government. I don't think Trump just has all the generals on his side like he used to joke about. But again, like, it's that slow boiling view amongst kind of the crazies who feel like using force over time can erode our democratic system. And like, just to look at what this junta has done in Myanmar. So obviously there was the Rohingya situation where it's considered one of the worst genocides in modern history, with 700,000 still trying to seek refuge in Bangladesh. Also, we have in 2009 the let's see, what was it? Oh yeah, the Myanmar Defense Alliance pushed out 30,000 refugees into China from a different part. Oh yeah, and also they on the Thai border they did some massacres and sent another 100,000 people into refugee camps as well. And my issue is that East Asia, a lot of Southeast Asia, I mean, is worried about intervening or doing anything because they're like, well, the junta creates this stability, and to me, there is no stability right now. Like, if you think that's stable, like displacement of millions of people at this point, yeah, that's not stable. And it's the problem is a lot of the like neighbors of Myanmar actually don't like what's going on, but they just see it as something that's really difficult to get involved in, and I'm just worried about that for sure as well. And I just wish, like, I wish more people understood just like how grave this situation is and didn't just try to like say, well, see, like you can just use a coup if you don't agree with an election, because like you said, first, it's a very different situation there, and B, it's not how a democracy should work. Full stop.
Yeah, no, it should not be. Let's say, again, you do think that maybe an election had been unethical or unfair. Well, you have to result in like the legal systems first, like go through legal processes to determine if that's true. Um, so like that happened in the United States, right? It went through courts and it lost. So to then declare that all of that is then void, then we should then have a military takeover. And again, when if people are saying, I want what happens in Myanmar to happen in the United States, okay, well, 845 people have been killed by the army and police since February 1st. Is that really, you really want that to happen here? Like, it's amazing the things people say when they're so enamored with a political candidate, with one person. I would never I would never be so like simping for Joe Biden that I would want a military coup to reinstate him. If he lost, he lost. The guy's an old corpse. I would have probably believed that he lost. Um, what I mean. Oh, okay. Well, Corvo's still back on the other topic. I will read this, Corvo, because I do want to let you have your chance to reply, but we are going to move on to other topics. Nothing personal, my guy. I do want to read it real quick. Biden not care about it. He lets Joe do whatever they want when dealing with him. He hadn't even had a meeting with regional leaders that were against that. Okay. Yeah, I mean that's valid criticism for sure.
Yeah,
Obviously, there is a discrepancy in how people are going to treat Angela Merkel and then other Eastern European. That's very valid criticism.
Yeah, definitely. Now back to this, back to this lovely, like, kind of on the U.S. side. Okay, so there's something that really terrifies me, and it's a trend we've seen actually talking about countries like Hungary.
Yeah.
Actually, Hungary is a good example of this, is that basically, like, what Michael Flynn and some of these crazies are doing is they're basically distracting, in my opinion. They're basically saying, and this is what Viktor Orban does all the time in Hungary. He'll say, let's, like, kick out immigrants. Let's go, like, beat up the gypsies. That type of stuff. And it never ends up really following through, but it's distracting from the legislation that's slowly eroding the democratic system. Mm-hmm. And so my issue here is that the media, and I guess we're somewhat guilty about this mentioning it, but I think it's crucial to mention as well, is that everyone's focused on Michael Flynn saying, okay, well, let's have a Myanmar type of situation, and Mike Lindell's still doing his my pill. He's sleeping with his pillow and thinking the election's still going back to Trump, and Trump's Trump's doing the same thing, talking about how he's going back in August. And everyone knows that's just not how the Constitution works, and everyone is just laughing about it in a way. But while we're laughing about it, other states are passing restrictive voting laws, other states are passing restrictive abortion laws, all this type of stuff. And so it's distracting from the actual things. And it's kind of a genius autocratic playbook is to do this. And I'm worried that it is happening in the U.S. Yeah, there's not this coup where the military is going to seize power, but there is a slow moving coup.
Yeah. Yeah, and well, and that's the thing is you need to have a free press and independent journalists to make sure people realize that there's slow moving coups. There is slow erosion of institutions, right? Those little stories about they slipped in a bill to let him, get reelected. They slipped in a thing to extend the 20-year term of counselor to 24. All that thing matters, and you need to have journalists and independent journalists to be able to call that out. And if you notice again the pattern between Hungary and Belarus and the connection to Myanmar is that they've always made journalists and reporters the enemy. They always associate them, as going against the state interest or state secrets, and they jail them with a reckless abandon. That's happening in Myanmar again. American journalists now, American journalists are now being detained in Myanmar for their coverage of what's going on over there. Just like how we just covered Roman in Belarus, feared for his life over his coverage of their election. So it's like, there's two different topics here, and of course we're talking a little bit more about Michael Flynn and the QAnon wing of the Trump Republican Party of like their take on Myanmar. But it's like the through line is, the importance of free press and journalism and the ability to call out when things are going on and are wrong. And then I think the second take is obviously with Michael Flynn is, to say something like you want a Myanmar coup in the United States is ridiculous and lacks a complete nuanced understanding of what is actually happening in Myanmar.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing I'll just, at least on my end, leave it with is that what worries me, though, is that the media is not doing their job, even in the U.S., in my opinion. And also 15% of Americans, according to a new study, think that the election was stolen and that Q is real. I'm not saying that 15% think everything is real about Q, but they've picked parts of it. Kind of like any religion, in a way. Like, you don't have to believe everything of it, but they definitely subscribe to the QAnon view. And the other worrying thing is that the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab found that Q is really not on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube anymore. It's all evaporated from the mainstream internet, and it's all underground. And so we really don't know. And
how many cockroaches are living in the closet? Yeah.
Yes, and so like Trump, emerged at that speech over the weekend, talked about how he's coming back in August. I've seen that growing hashtag, like only a good Democrat is a dead Democrat. I just worry that there are crazies who are going to try to do some crazy things, especially if Trump keeps doing it. And just looking at how things do end in the rest of the world, we need to remember that we're not immune to these problems. And we need to keep shining our democracy. We need to keep upkeeping it. We need to keep talking to each other. And we're not doing any of that right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I heard that. Like, he had that speech and he mentioned that, he's going to take back the White House, which is something that everyone says. But he said sooner than you might think, which is weird. And now there's the New York Times reporting that, Trump is telling his buddies, and again, this is just a report. I'm not saying this is true. I don't know for sure, but it seems like something he would do, is that he's telling all his friends and that he's going to be reinstated in August. Like, he might genuinely believe that he might also want and believe a Myanmar coup is going to happen, which is just again also kind of like, I don't know if he's just saying that to make a media wave, or he genuinely believes that, or if it's just false. Like, I don't know. But, there's multiple reports going on now that he's talking to people about being reinstated in August. And you're like, dude, what are you talking about? But that's so dangerous because look at what happened on January 6th. Last time people brushed this aside, it ended up in a police officer losing his life. And a woman, an innocent woman, a QAnon supporter woman, believed wholeheartedly she was doing something good for the country when she wasn't, and invaded the Capitol and was shot for it. So multiple people died. The last time a date was set to take the country back, and now there's conversations around Michael Flynn talking about a Myanmar coup, Trump definitely signaling he's going to be politically active at least through 22, if not 24, and talks of being reinstated. People have to take this seriously. I really don't want another January 6th again.
Absolutely not. And, unfortunately, a failed coup usually doesn't end there. Usually there's another one, at least looking at kind of the lens of history. So, but I agree with you. It's all irresponsible. Fox News is irresponsible. The right-wing media chambers have become irresponsible. It's all bad. But
anyway, so that should wrap that up. All sorts of crazy shit going on, but we wanted to cover it all, give a little bit of at least some perspective and nuance to these conversations. Certainly do all your research yourself. Don't take our word for it. Verify what we're saying through a litany of other trusted sources. And on top of that, have a wonderful day. And this has been the Tonic Accord Podcast.